rusty hinge screamed as Elara yanked open the barn door, the sudden movement silhouetting her against the last slivers of an angry sunset. Rain lashed down, a relentless drumbeat against the corrugated iron roof. Inside, the air hung heavy with the smell of damp straw and something else. Something acrid and metallic. Her breath hitched. Old Man Hemlock, the reclusive farmer, lay slumped against a stack of hay bales, his eyes wide and unseeing, a crude straw effigy clutched in his stiffening fingers. "No," Elara whispered, the words stolen by the wind whistling through gaps in the walls. Her gaze darted around the cavernous space, searching, dread coiling in her gut. She'd known something was wrong when Mrs. Gable, the postmistress, mentioned Hemlock hadn't collected his mail in days. The old man was a creature of habit, even if his habits were mostly centered around avoiding human interaction. A low, guttural chuckle echoed from the shadows at the far end of the barn. Elara spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. Standing rigidly beside the threshing machine was the Scarecrow. Not a scarecrow, but the Scarecrow. Hemlock's Scarecrow. Its burlap sack head, usually slouched and lifeless, was now tilted at an unnerving angle. The crudely painted smile seemed wider, more malicious in the gloom. "He finally paid his due," a voice rasped, dry as dead leaves. It was coming from the Scarecrow. Elara stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Her mind reeled. Scarecrows don't talk. They don't move. They definitely don't sound like desiccated whispers from a forgotten grave. Yet, here it was, its straw-stuffed body swaying almost imperceptibly, as if in silent judgment. What are you?" Elara stammered, her voice barely a thread. "A guardian," the Scarecrow replied, its voice gaining a strange resonance. "A watcher, and now, a collector." The air in the barn grew colder, the shadows seeming to deepen and writhe. Elara felt a primal urge to flee, to run screaming into the storm, but her feet were rooted to the spot. Her eyes fell back on Hemlock, then on the Scarecrow, the effigy in the old man's hand. It was a miniature version of the Scarecrow itself. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. She had to get out. But as she took a tentative step towards the door, the Scarecrow raised a straw-stuffed arm, pointing a gnarled, stick-like finger at her. "You came for him, didn't you?" it rasped. Curiosity, the most dangerous of all human failings. Elara froze. How could it know? She hadn't told anyone she was coming to check on Hemlock. A chill colder than the rain outside seeped into her bones. "Now," the Scarecrow continued, its voice a dry rustle, "you will hear the story of Hemlock's bargain, and its ultimate price." 3 months earlier, Elara had moved to the quiet, forgotten village of Oakhaven, seeking refuge from the relentless clamor of city life. She'd bought the old miller's cottage, a charming, albeit ramshackle, place nestled on the edge of Hemlock's sprawling, unkempt fields. Oakhaven was a place where time moved slower, where gossip was the main form of entertainment, and where Old Man Hemlock was the village's most enduring mystery. He was a spectral figure, seen only at dawn or dusk, tending his fields with an almost ritualistic dedication. His Scarecrow, a hulking, silent sentinel, always stood watch over his corn. The villagers had countless tales about Hemlock, a hermit, a madman, a man who'd seen too much. But the most persistent story, whispered over pints at the rusty Pitchfork pub, was about a pact he'd made long ago. A pact with something in his fields, something that ensured his crops always thrived, even in the harshest years. Elara, with her city-bred skepticism, dismissed it as rural superstition, until she met Mrs. Gable. "He talks to it, you know," Mrs. Gable had confided one afternoon, her voice hushed as Elara picked up her mail. "The Scarecrow. I've seen him, early mornings, standing there, head bowed, like he's having a conversation." Elara had chuckled, attributing it to loneliness. But then, she started noticing things. Hemlock's corn, impossibly tall and golden, even as other farms struggled with blight. The way he meticulously mended the Scarecrow, almost reverently, after every storm. And the small, hand-carved wooden figures she sometimes saw him leaving at the base of the Scarecrow's pole. Crude, miniature versions of the Scarecrow itself. One sweltering July afternoon, Elara was sketching the vibrant wildflowers that bloomed along the edge of Hemlock's fields. She saw him then, not talking to the Scarecrow, but simply standing before it, perfectly still, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking with what looked like silent sobs. A wave of unexpected pity washed over her. Hemlock, for all his gruffness, was just an old man, alone. That evening, a fierce thunderstorm ripped through Oakhaven. Lightning cracked the sky, and the wind howled like a banshee. Elara watched from her window as the storm raged, thinking of Hemlock in his isolated farm. The next morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, she saw it, the Scarecrow, its pole snapped, its burlap head lying face down in the mud. Curiosity, combined with a strange sense of empathy for the old man, compelled her to walk over. Hemlock was already there, meticulously attempting to reattach the Scarecrow's head with twine. He looked distraught, almost frantic. "Mr. Hemlock?" Elara called out, approaching cautiously. He flinched, startled, dropping the twine. His eyes, usually clouded and distant, were wide with a terror Elara had never seen. "You shouldn't be here," he croaked, his voice raw. "I just wanted to see if you needed help," Elara offered, gesturing to the damaged Scarecrow. Hemlock shook his head vigorously. "No, just leave it. Leave it be." He then did something even stranger. He picked up the Scarecrow's fallen head, looked at it with an expression of profound sorrow, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset it." That was the moment Elara's skepticism began to fray. Now, in the darkened barn, the Scarecrow spoke again, its voice a dry, rasping monotone. "He brought me to life, you see, not with magic, but with desperation." The air crackled with a strange energy. Elara hugged herself, trying to ward off the encroaching cold. "Years ago, this land was barren," the Scarecrow continued, its gaze fixed on Elara. "Hemlock's crops withered. His wife, she grew weak. They were starving." A flash of lightning illuminated the Scarecrow's stitched smile, making it seem impossibly wide. He prayed. He pleaded. He made a vow to whatever would listen. A bargain for abundance, for life. Elara's mind raced. The village stories, the pact. "And something answered?" she whispered. "I answered," the Scarecrow affirmed, a dry rustle accompanying its words. "I offered him the impossible. Harvests beyond measure, crops that defied drought and blight. But every gift comes with a price." It paused, its burlap head seeming to swivel, as if addressing an unseen audience. The price was attention, devotion, and every harvest, a small offering, a tiny effigy, imbued with a piece of his own life force, a promise to keep me whole, to keep me alive. Elara looked down at the miniature Scarecrow in Hemlock's lifeless hand. So, that's what those figures were. Not just carvings, but offerings. "He kept his end of the bargain," the Scarecrow stated, its voice devoid of emotion. "For decades, his fields thrived. His wife, she recovered. She lived a full life, passed away peacefully in her sleep years later." A bitter, almost envious note entered its voice. He got everything he asked for, but as he grew older, his devotion wavered. He grew tired of the rituals, tired of me. Elara felt a sudden pang of understanding. Hemlock's reclusiveness, his strange behavior. It wasn't madness. It was a burden, a terrifying, silent servitude. He tried to stop, Elara murmured, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. He tried to break the pact. He did, the Scarecrow confirmed. After the last harvest, he refused to make the final offering. He left me broken in the field, thinking I would simply cease. Elara remembered the storm, the fallen Scarecrow, Hemlock's frantic attempts to fix it. He hadn't been fixing a simple garden ornament. He'd been trying to appease a vengeful entity. But the pact cannot be broken, the Scarecrow declared, its voice rising in volume, filling the barn. Not without a payment in full, and the full payment is life itself. It gestured with its stick arm towards Hemlock's body. He chose to withhold, and so the balance was restored. The rain outside intensified, a fitting soundtrack to the chilling revelation. Elara felt a wave of nausea. Hemlock hadn't just died, he'd been taken. "Why are you telling me this?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. The Scarecrow tilted its head, its burlap face expressionless, yet somehow conveying a sense of cold amusement. "Because you found him, because you touched the bargain, and because—" It paused, a long, drawn-out moment of silence that stretched Elara's nerves to their breaking point. "You remind me of him, full of curiosity, full of life." Elara's blood ran cold. The implication was clear, sharp as a blade. "No," she whispered, backing away slowly, her eyes darting towards the barn door. "Oh, but yes." The Scarecrow's voice was a dry cackle now. "The land needs a guardian. The pact requires a keeper, and Hemlock's vacancy must be filled." As the Scarecrow took a slow, deliberate step forward, its straw limbs creaking, Elara understood the true horror. It wasn't just about Hemlock's death. It was about what came next. She wasn't just an observer. She was the next offering. The barn door, which had seemed so inviting moments ago, now felt miles away. The storm raged, mirroring the tempest in Elara's soul. The talking Scarecrow advanced, its silent, stitched smile the last thing Elara saw before she turned and bolted into the heart of the storm. The wind howled behind her, carrying with it the dry, rustling laugh of the Scarecrow, a sound that promised that the ancient pact of Oakhaven was far from over. Elara ran, blindly, through the pouring rain, the taste of fear metallic on her tongue. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but the image of the Scarecrow's advancing form spurred her onward. The village lights were a distant, hazy glow through the sheets of rain. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away, to escape the impossible, terrifying reality of a talking, vengeful Scarecrow. She stumbled, falling hard in the mud, scraping her hands and knees. For a moment, she lay there, gasping, the cold mud a shocking contrast to the burning heat in her chest. Then, the sound of dry leaves rustling, impossibly close, made her scramble to her feet. The Scarecrow, it was following her. Panicked, Elara saw a flicker of light through the trees. Not the village, but a single, isolated cabin she'd glimpsed once before. Old Man Silas's place, another Oakhaven recluse, though less isolated than Hemlock. She veered towards it, desperate, hoping for refuge, for a phone, for anything that could sever her from this nightmare. She burst through the cabin door, not bothering to knock, the old wood groaning in protest. Silas, a wiry man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, sat by a crackling fire, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up, startled, his eyes widening at the sight of Elara, soaked, mud-splattered, and shaking uncontrollably. "Elara, what in blazes?" he began, but Elara cut him off, panting, incoherent. "Scarecrow, Hemlock, he's dead. It talks." Silas's weathered face, usually impassive, shifted. A shadow passed over his eyes, a look of grim recognition that sent a fresh wave of terror through Elara. "The Scarecrow," Silas said, his voice low, his whittling knife forgotten. "It found you." "You know about it?" Elara gasped, her hope for immediate disbelief shattering. Silas nodded slowly, rising from his chair. We all know, in our bones. It's part of Oakhaven, part of the land. He walked to a window, peering out into the rain-swept night. Hemlock, I had a feeling. He was getting old, and careless. Elara stared at him, bewildered. Careless? He was murdered. By that thing. Silas turned, his gaze holding a deep, ancient sorrow. Murdered? Yes, but the pact is not a secret, Elara. It is a burden, passed down through generations of landowners here. My grandfather knew. His grandfather knew. It ensures the land thrives, but it demands respect and adherence. Pact? Elara repeated, her mind struggling to comprehend this village-wide conspiracy of silence. The guardian of the fields, Silas explained, gesturing vaguely towards the darkness outside. It promises bounty. It promises life for the land. But it is ancient, and it is particular. If its needs are not met, if its offerings are forgotten, it collects. Hemlock's family made the original pact generations ago, when the land was barren and the village faced starvation. They sacrificed something, and for that, the Scarecrow watches over their lineage, but also demands a price. So, what? Everyone in Oakhaven just accepts this? Elara asked, horrified. Silas shrugged, a weary gesture. We learn to respect it, to live with it, to ensure its requirements are met by those bound to it. Hemlock was the last of his line. He carried the burden alone. He looked at Elara, his eyes narrowed. Until now, the implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. No, Elara whispered again, shaking her head. I'm not part of this. You touched it, didn't you? Silas asked, his voice gentle but firm. That day, when its head was knocked off, you felt its presence. It knows you now. And you, Elara, are new to Oakhaven, new to its ways. You are vulnerable. A chilling thought struck Elara. It needs a keeper, a guardian of the land. Hemlock's vacancy must be filled, it said. Silas simply looked at her, his silence more eloquent than any words. So, what do I do? Elara pleaded, her voice cracking. Run? Leave Oakhaven? Never come back? It will follow you, Silas stated, without a hint of doubt. It is tied to this land, but its reach, it extends to those it marks. Just then, a faint scratching sound came from the cabin door, a dry, rustling sound, like straw dragging on wood. Both Elara and Silas froze. It knows you're here, Silas murmured, his hand going to an old, worn shotgun leaning against the fireplace. It respects boundaries mostly, but if provoked, Elara stared at the door, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. There must be a way, Elara said, her mind racing. A way to break the pact, or appease it, without dying. Silas's eyes held a spark of something Elara couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps, but the ancient ways are not easily learned. Not in one night. He gestured to the shotgun. For now, we defend. But come morning, if you are still here, we talk, and we learn. The scratching on the door intensified, then abruptly stopped. A deep, resonant thud echoed through the cabin, as if something heavy had slammed against the wood. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. Elara and Silas stood side by side, listening, their breath held. The storm outside seemed to have quieted, leaving only the distant drip of water from the eaves. Then, a voice, dry and rasping, came from just outside the door, seeming to seep through the very walls of the cabin. You can run, Elara, but you cannot hide from the land's call. It seeks its guardian, and it will have its due. Elara knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the nightmare had only just begun. The talking scarecrow was not just a story, but a living, breathing, terrifying truth. And she, a city girl seeking peace, had inadvertently stumbled into its ancient, unyielding grasp. The sun would rise, but what terrors the new day would bring, Elara could only guess. And as the cabin remained in a fearful silence, she knew one thing for certain: she would never look at a scarecrow the same way again.